Today, we're diving into the story of one of the 20th century's most puzzling figures, L. Ron Hubbard. This is a man who started out writing fantasy and sci-fi for pulp magazines and ended up the founder of a global religion. So you have to ask, right? How does that happen? How does a man go from dreaming up stories about spaceships to creating a new system of belief that millions would follow? Well, let's get into it. You know, our story doesn't begin with some grand spiritual revelation. Nope. It starts in the wild, fast-paced world of pulp fiction magazines, where you got paid by the word and the stories were, well, they were everywhere. And L. Ron Hubbard wasn't just a writer, he was a writing machine. We're talking hundreds and hundreds of stories in the 30s and 40s. This is where he really perfected the art of telling a good yarn, of building worlds that could suck you right in. And that skill, well, it turned out to be pretty important later on. But here's the thing. There's a huge gap between the larger-than-life heroes he wrote about and his own early life. I mean, it was kind of marked by one setback after another. He dropped out of college, he failed the entrance exam for the Naval Academy. Even his time in the Navy during World War II was, let's just say, it was rocky. He was removed from command of 2 different ships, once after attacking what the Navy later figured out was just a known magnetic deposit. Basically, a rock on the ocean floor. So, despite all these bumps in the road, Hubbard's ambition was just massive. You can see it right here in this letter to his wife. He wasn't just hoping to be a famous writer. He wanted to smash his name into history so hard that he'd become a legend. This guy was thinking big, really big. And that incredible ambition, it's what eventually led him to pivot from writing fiction to creating something else entirely. He was about to introduce the world to what he called a modern science of mental health. He called it Dianetics. Now, before he was the guy with all the answers, Hubbard was a man with a lot of questions about his own mental state. In this letter to the VA in 1947, he's practically begging for psychiatric help. He talks about suicidal inclinations and not being able to find his footing after the war. It's a really stark contrast to the all-knowing figure he'd soon become. So in 1950, he publishes this book, and the central idea is pretty powerful. It says that all of our problems, and I mean everything from bad eyesight to anxiety, are caused by these hidden, painful memories he called engrams. But, and here's the hook, through a kind of talk therapy called auditing, you could get rid of them. You could become clear, basically a version of you with a perfect mind, a higher IQ, the whole shebang. And let me tell you, people went nuts for it. The book was a smash hit. It wasn't just a bestseller, it created a nationwide craze. Suddenly there were 500 of these Dianetics groups all across the country. It was a phenomenon. But the whole thing came crashing down almost as fast as it took off. There was this big public demonstration where the supposedly clear patient couldn't even remember basic facts, like the color of Hubbard's tie. His personal life was imploding. His wife accused him of being mentally ill, and he responded by kidnapping her and their baby. It got so messy that an FBI agent just wrote, "appears mental" on his file. And, no surprise, the whole Dianetics Foundation went bankrupt. But just when it looked like it was all over, a new idea rose from the ashes. See, Hubbard had lost the rights to the name Dianetics in the bankruptcy, so he came up with something new, something better: Scientology. And this was an absolutely genius move. Think about it. Dianetics was a science, right? There meant it could be criticized by scientists, and he could be accused of practicing medicine without a license. But Scientology, that was a religion. The goal wasn't just being clear anymore. Now you could become an operating thetan, an immortal spirit with godlike powers. So why the shift to religion? Well, a lot of people point to this quote. It's something he reportedly said at a sci-fi convention, just a couple of years before Dianetics even came out. And so he went for it. He started talking up the religion angle. And by the end of 1953, the first Church of Scientology was officially incorporated. This new religious status gave him a legal shield. And it was also incredibly profitable. The church paid him a cut of its gross income, which was already $250,000 a year by 1957. As Scientology got bigger and richer, the controversies just grew right alongside it. The last part of Hubbard's life was really defined by these huge, messy fights, and, in the end, by him just completely vanishing from public life. When it came to critics, Hubbard had a very clear, very aggressive policy. He basically said, don't defend, always attack. He told his followers that the point of suing someone wasn't always to win, it was to harass them, to bury them in legal fees until they just gave up. And this policy led to some major conflicts. The FDA raided their offices. Australia actually banned Scientology for a while. A French court convicted Hubbard of fraud. And then there was Operation Snow White, a massive scheme to infiltrate the U.S. government that landed 11 senior Scientologists in jail, with Hubbard named as an unindicted co-conspirator.
After all that, with the scandals piling up, Hubbard just disappeared. He spent the last 10 years of his life completely hidden away, seen only by a tiny circle of his most loyal followers.
So when he died from a stroke in 1986, the church didn't just say he died. Oh no. The official story was that he had finished all his research here, and his physical body was just holding him back. So he had consciously decided to drop his body to continue his work on another spiritual plane. And that brings us back to the man himself, a pulp raider who wanted to become a legend, and, well, he did. But was he a spiritual visionary who found a real path to a higher state, a brilliant charlatan who built an empire, or maybe just a deeply troubled man who created a world he could finally control? That's the question his wild, unbelievable story leaves us with.